Military dictatorship. This form of rule occurs when the armed forces seize control of the state's political apparatus, often following a sudden coup d'état or during a period of extreme civil unrest. In these systems, the country is typically governed by a committee of high-ranking officers known as a junta, rather than a single charismatic civilian figure. The justification for such a takeover is almost always presented as a temporary measure to restore order, eliminate corruption, or protect the nation from a perceived external or internal threat. Historical examples range from the rule of Augusto Pinochet in Chile, who implemented sweeping economic changes under a repressive military guard, to various modern governments in Myanmar. These regimes are significant because they prioritize national discipline and internal security above all else, often replacing the civil court system with military tribunals and suspending the right to protest. Because the military is already an organized, armed institution, these dictatorships are uniquely difficult to challenge from within, as the very people tasked with national defense are the ones managing the police and the prisons. Single-party dictatorship. This type of regime centers around a single political organization that holds a total monopoly on government power and effectively bans or hollows out all other competing parties. Unlike a military takeover, the power here is institutionalized within a complex party structure that controls every level of society, from local neighborhood committees to the national economy and the education system. Membership in the party often becomes a requirement for professional advancement, and the party's internal hierarchy becomes the true government of the country. The Soviet Union under the Communist Party and modern-day China are the most prominent examples of this model, where the party's survival and its ideological goals are treated as synonymous with the nation's interests. This structure is designed for immense long-term stability and ideological consistency, making it nearly impossible for an organized opposition to form because the state's resources and the party's interests are perfectly fused into a single entity. Personalist dictatorship. This is a system where the state's power is concentrated entirely in the hands of one specific individual, rather than a stable institution like a political party or a military board. The leader's authority often stems from an intense cult of personality, where their image is displayed on every street corner and their personal whims or erratic decisions essentially become the law of the land overnight. Because the leader's inner circle is usually filled with family members, close friends, or sycophants who are chosen for loyalty rather than competence, these regimes can be highly unpredictable and prone to massive levels of corruption. Leaders like Mobutu Sese Seko in Zaire or Idi Amin in Uganda exemplified this style, where the state's treasury was often treated as a personal bank account. These dictatorships are particularly volatile for the country involved because they often face a total collapse, a power vacuum, or even a civil war once the central figure dies or is removed, as there are no functioning institutions left to catch the falling pieces. Absolute monarchy. While we often think of kings and queens as ceremonial figures in the modern world, this specific type of dictatorship involves a hereditary ruler who wields total and unchecked political power. In this system, there are no meaningful elections, and the monarch is not bound by a constitution, a parliament, or an independent judiciary. Instead, their right to rule is often justified by ancient tradition or divine right. This is one of the oldest forms of government in human history, though it is increasingly rare today, persisting in countries like Saudi Arabia, Eswatini, and the United Arab Emirates. It differs from other dictatorships because the transition of power is usually very clear and follows a strict family line, which can provide a different kind of long-term predictability that other regimes lack. However, it completely excludes the general public from the decision-making process and relies on the idea that a single family is inherently more fit to rule than anyone else in the nation. Theocratic dictatorship. This regime is defined by the rule of religious leaders or a government that operates strictly under the mandate of a specific religious law. In this system, the ultimate authority is not a constitution written by people or a secular legal code, but a set of religious texts or divine revelations as interpreted by a small, elite group of clerics. The most famous modern example is Iran, where the supreme leader outranks the president and holds veto power over all secular government decisions to ensure they align with religious doctrine. These dictatorships are unique because they merge the spiritual life of the citizens with the political life of the state, meaning that any political dissent is often legally and socially treated as a religious crime or an act of heresy. This makes forming an opposition movement incredibly difficult, as it requires challenging not just a political leader, but the very religious foundations of the society itself. Hybrid regime. Often referred to by political scientists as competitive authoritarianism, this is a more subtle and modern form of dictatorship, where the government maintains the outward appearance of a democracy while rigging the entire system from the inside. These countries hold regular elections, allow multiple political parties to exist, and claim to have a free press. But the ruling group uses state resources, control over the media, and a hand-picked judiciary to ensure that the opposition never actually has a fair chance to win. Leaders like Viktor Orban in Hungary or Vladimir Putin in Russia are frequently cited as examples of this approach, where the rules of the game are constantly changed to favor the incumbent. This style of rule is significant because it is much harder for the international community to criticize than a traditional military junta. The leader can always point to a landslide victory at the ballot box as a legitimate justification for their continued stay in power, even if the voters were given no real choice. Understanding how the world is governed is the first step in changing it. If you found this breakdown helpful, share it with someone who loves history or politics. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.